I still remember the exact moment my world stopped turning. Not when my heart ceased beating, but when something far worse happened. The moment I discovered my own flesh and blood had emptied my life savings. The phone screen glowed with a notification that chilled my blood. Available balance, 0 Mullers. I read it again and again and a fourth time. My hands trembled not from old age, though I was 68 years strong, but from something deeper, a sickening knot that forms when the soul understands but the heart refuses to accept. I called the bank. A robot answered first, then a human representative with a voice too cheerful for the gravity of my situation. Ma'am, the movements were made online. Wire transfers totaling over $180,000. $180,000. My entire life's work, my savings, my security, the only safety net I'd ever managed to weave for myself after a lifetime of sacrifice. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice broken, as if I knew the answer but needed to hear it from someone else. It was all transferred to an account in the name of Michael Jackson, my son, my only son. Ma'am, the executive continued with indifference, do you want to file a fraud report? I didn't respond. I hung up without saying a word. Silence filled the house. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock in the kitchen and the buzz of a dying fluorescent light bulb. Outside, children played oblivious to the abyss that had just opened inside me. The cul-de-sac of Renee had started long before she actually slapped me. That physical blow was merely the culmination of years of subtle dismissals and growing disdain. But this financial betrayal cut deeper than any slap could. The cul-de-sac of Renee didn't just make my glasses fall, it shattered the entire illusion of my family. My living room looked the same as it always had. The worn cloth armchair, the one I bought when Michael turned 8, using the first decent paycheck I earned after working double shifts at the hospital. The walls still held the framed photos of my son throughout his life. In preschool, his first middle school uniform, the day he received his college diploma. Everything I had done I did for him, I had been a nurse for 40 years, worked through holidays, birthdays, storms, stayed overtime when others went home, picked up extra shifts when the bills piled too high, stood on my feet until they swelled and ached, all so Michael could have what I never did, a chance, an education, a future not determined by the color of his skin or the neighborhood where he was born. My husband died when Michael was only 8 years old. Heart attack. Sudden. The kind that doesn't give you time to say goodbye. After the funeral, I had 2 choices: crumble or carry on. For Michael, there was only one real option. I sold my wedding ring to pay for his high school tuition when the scholarship fell through. I gave him the family land my daddy left me in rural Georgia when he needed college funds. I helped with his wedding expenses, even though Renee never cared for me. I cooked for him, kept his favorite childhood recipes, remembered every birthday with a homemade cake, even after he told me store-bought would be fine. And through it all, I watched him drift further away. Mom, you don't understand this world, he'd say dismissively. Things aren't done like they used to be. Renee and I have big plans, and I need to focus on those plans. You'll always be in my heart, Mama, but you can't be tied to me for life. 1 week before discovering the betrayal, I had tried to visit Michael at his condo in Hancock Park. I brought a tray of my famous fried chicken and collard greens that I made myself, despite the arthritis making my fingers ache. I rang the bell. No one opened the door. I waited under the sun, sitting on a bench for 2 hours, until the doorman approached me. Are you looking for Mr. Michael Jackson? Yes, I'm his mother. Ah, well, I was instructed not to let you in if you come unannounced. I swallowed hard. And why is that? I couldn't tell you, ma'am, but those were my instructions. I walked back home. I didn't take the metro bus. I wanted the air to hit my face, even if it was hot and dirty. I thought of every meal I denied myself, every dawn I worked overtime, every penny I saved for my son, every sacrifice made without complaint. That same night, Angela came to visit. She brought pecan pie and coffee. Angela had been my neighbor for 30 years, ever since she moved to South Central after retiring from her accounting firm. She understood numbers the way I understood medicine. She could see patterns in bank statements the way I could see symptoms in patients. You've always been strong, Martha. Don't let this break your heart, she said, pouring coffee into my favorite mug, the one with faded roses Michael had given me for Mother's Day when he was 10. Do you think children ever regret it, Angela? Yes, of course they do. When their mother isn't around, they realize everything. Well, I hope it's not too late when he realizes. And what are you going to do? I looked up at my old friend. In that moment, something shifted inside me, something that hadn't been there before, a resolve, a clarity. I'm going to smile just like they taught me. Angela frowned. Smile, what do you mean? I've cried enough, Angela. Now I'm going to smile in silence because I have nothing left to lose. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes dangerous. The landline rang, the old phone I kept out of habit. Few people had that number anymore. Hello, I said, my voice flat. Martha. Martha, honey, did you see your Michael's Instagram? It was the excited voice of Angela calling from her house just 2 doors down. He's in South Beach, child eating fancy food with his wife and mother-in-law. Lord, what a life they live. They look like movie stars. I swallowed hard. My soul seemed to leave my body for an instant. I walked slowly to my bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept my old smartphone, and searched for my son's profile. I wasn't big on social media, but I followed him from a distance, like someone peering through a window at a life that no longer belonged to them. There he was, Michael, my only son, the boy I brought into the world with pain and raised alone since his father left me for the cold embrace of death. He was smiling, a glass in hand, dressed in a crisp white shirt, embracing Renee, his wife, and Catherine, the mother-in-law, who always looked down her nose at me. The photo caption read, "Miami, my new beginning. I deserve this." And in the comments, Renee had written, "Good things come to those who wait. Thanks for everything, mama-in-law," with a money emoji. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or break anything. I just stood there holding the phone like a burning brick. Then, without anyone to notice, I smiled. But it was a different kind of smile, as if I finally understood something I had avoided seeing for years. Far away under the cloudy sky and among the palm streets of South Beach, Michael raised his glass without guilt. "See," Renee said, sipping expensive champagne. "It was a good idea to take the money. She's going to kick the bucket soon anyway. Better we use it before it goes to medical bills." Catherine, her mother, let out a harsh laugh. "Clueless old lady. She doesn't even know what an airport is. She was never going to do anything useful with that cash." Michael didn't say anything. He looked at the ocean with shining eyes, but something was churning inside him. He kept quiet, just as he had learned to do since he was a boy and was hungry, and I would tell him, "Hold on, baby. We'll have food tomorrow." The walls of my house seemed older that night. Everything was in its place, but nothing felt the same. I started searching. In drawers, behind furniture, under cushions, looking for something I couldn't name but somehow knew was there. In the back of the hallway closet behind old winter coats we rarely needed in Los Angeles, I found a manila folder. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen, withdrawal slips with signatures that looked like mine but weren't, pages of account applications with my name listed as co-signer. My son had been planning this for months, maybe years. As I spread the papers across my kitchen table, something caught my eye. The corner of a white envelope peeking out from beneath my old armchair. I bent down my knees, protesting, and pulled out a plastic bag containing a folded document. I opened it and read the header, "Last Will and Testament." It listed my full name, my address, and a signature similar to mine. I felt something squeeze my chest. I sat on the floor with the document spread out on my legs and read it again. According to this paper, I had left my house and savings to Michael in case of my death, but I had never drafted a will, and at the bottom was a forgery of my signature. I felt the silence of the house way more than ever. Only the ticking of the clock and the distant barking of a dog broke the quiet. I didn't cry. I wasn't even surprised anymore. But this time something did break inside me. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the confirmation. Michael hadn't just stolen from me. He had prepared for my death, had perhaps even wished for it. I needed help. I called Walter Davis, an old friend who had been a lawyer before retiring. Walter and I had history. We'd been sweethearts in high school before life pulled us in different directions. He married someone else. So did I. But after both our spouses passed, we'd reconnected as friends. He still looked at me sometimes with eyes that remembered our youth. "Come over," I said when he answered. "I need you to see something." "What happened?" His voice immediately concerned. "I found what I wasn't supposed to find." 2 hours later, Walter sat at my kitchen table with the document spread before him. His glasses perched on the end of his nose, his expression growing darker with each paper he examined. "This is not only illegal, it's dangerous," he said finally, pointing at the forged will. "If he had filed this, you could have lost everything without ever knowing." "Do you think it was him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Walter stayed silent for a moment. He placed the paper on the table, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. This isn't your signature, Martha, and you have no idea how to draft a will. It's obviously not yours." He looked up at me, his eyes serious. "The most concerning part is that this is a draft. If there's a draft, there may have been an attempt to file the real thing." I stared at my own wrinkled hands, stained by the years, but still steady. I remembered the day I finally made the last mortgage payment on the house. 30 years of effort, reheated meals, broken shoes, working in the hottest days, cleaning up other people's messes, enduring bosses' shouts, all to have something of my own, something no one could take away. "He wanted to kill me on paper," I said without raising my voice. Walter looked up. He didn't know if I meant it as a metaphor or a literal truth. The silence between us stretched until the coffee on the stove boiled over. "And now what are you going to do?" he asked finally. I smiled, the same smile Michael didn't know how to read, the smile that had carried me through a lifetime of hardship. Now I'm going to bury him but awake. Not even 3 days had passed since that discovery, when I received an unexpected call from Dr. Evans, the internist at the health clinic where I had occasional checkups. "I need you to come in, Mrs. Jackson, today if you can." I felt my legs tremble. I walked to the medical center with the same dignity with which I had faced everything in my life. I entered the office in my usual clothing, pressed slacks, a blouse with a small flower pattern, my scarf tied tight around my neck, and the notebook where I wrote down every pill. The doctor greeted me kindly but without hope. In his gaze was a compassion that smelled of farewell. "We did new blood tests and the results are not good." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, waiting for what I already knew was coming. "You have leukemia, ma'am. It's in an advanced stage." He sighed heavily. "It pains me to tell you this way, but there's no time for pleasantries. Your immune system is compromised. We estimate you have about 6 months." I froze. I stared at a fixed point on the wall, a small bird-shaped patch of dampness. Not a single tear, not a single question. "Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Dr. Evans leaned forward, concerned by my lack of reaction. "I understand how much it costs to die with dignity." The doctor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "There are options. We can start chemotherapy, but it's not certain you'll respond. The treatment is aggressive and expensive." "Does it take my life faster?" "Not necessarily, but—" "Then no." I stood up, gathering my purse. I don't like the thought of death catching me in a hospital gown. The doctor didn't know what to say. He had never seen anyone take the news of their own death with such composure. I turned to him before leaving. 6 months is enough. For what I have to do, it's more than enough." I walked back home, not because I couldn't afford a ride, but because I needed to feel the city. I wanted every step to take me back to my roots, my history, my purpose. I crossed the street where I was once almost hit by a car while taking Michael to preschool. I passed the market where I worked cleaning restrooms for $40 a day before nursing school. I waved to Mr. Theodore, the juice stand man who had no teeth but a good memory. When I arrived home, I went straight to my bedroom. I pulled out a wooden box hidden under the bed. Inside was my notebook with notes, clippings, receipts, unsent letters, and an old envelope where I kept the only photo I had of Michael as a baby when he still slept hugging my leg. I looked at it for a long time, then turned on the stove, put water to boil for tea, and as the steam rose, I murmured to myself, "No more praying, now the work begins." Angela came over that evening bringing her laptop and reading glasses. "I need you to help me understand something," I said, spreading the bank statements on the table. "How can I tell if someone is messing with my accounts?" Angela frowned. "Your son?" "Yes." "Do you have access to your bank statements?" "They don't come to me anymore." "And transfers, have you ever made one?" "I've never made one. I don't even know how." For several nights, Angela taught me how to access the bank portal on my cell phone, how to review movements, how to identify deposits and withdrawals. The first time I saw the complete list of transactions, I felt the world crashing down on me. Large amounts, recent dates, transfers that coincided with the days Michael visited or asked for some document. He said he needed it for paperwork. He said it was for insurance. Angela looked at me with pity and anger mixed in her eyes. "Martha, it's not paperwork. It's theft." My heart broke again, but I didn't cry. Instead, I asked for a notebook and began writing down every single transaction daytime amount. Every dollar stolen had a name attached to it. One Friday night, when everything seemed lost, Angela showed me something else. "See this transaction? They signed your name here to activate a joint account, but the signature isn't yours. It's a crude copy." I touched the screen as if touching an open wound. They didn't even bother to hide it well. "What are you going to do?" I closed the phone, took a deep breath, and said, "Nothing, not yet." The next morning, I started with the first step of my plan. Walter came early, his briefcase filled with legal documents. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as we sat at my kitchen table. "Once we start, there's no going back." "I'm sure." I picked up a red notebook I'd bought the day before. On the first page, I wrote, "This is not the end. It is the beginning of my silence, and my silence will hurt more than any scream." Walter nodded, understanding the determination in my eyes. We began the process of filing a complaint, not as a mother, but as a citizen. We reported the forgery of my signature, the attempt to appropriate property, and attach the evidence we'd found. Then, using a clause Walter knew well, we requested the temporary freezing of the bank account from which Michael had withdrawn my money. The clause allowed for stopping financial movements if elder financial abuse was suspected. It wasn't easy, but Walter knew the legal system inside and out. "Are you ready for what's coming?" he asked as we signed the papers at the courthouse. "I was born ready," I replied. "I just didn't know it until now." After that, I went to the store, bought a new notebook bound in red leather, and started writing what would be my final testimony. Not one of tears, but one of documentation. On the first page, I wrote, "To my son Michael, I delivered you from my womb with pain. I gave you my life with love, and you ripped away my dignity without blinking. This is not revenge. It is justice. And justice is all I have left to die in peace." Meanwhile, in Miami, my son and his wife continued their charade of happiness. They uploaded daily photos, made videos with filters, and showed off plates of food they couldn't even pronounce. But I could sense something wasn't right. Mother's intuition, perhaps. Or maybe just the knowledge that things built on lies eventually crumble. I didn't need to wait long for confirmation. Walter called me late one night, his voice triumphant. "It worked, Martha. The accounts are frozen. The bank flagged the transactions as suspicious. They'll have to come back and explain themselves." I closed my eyes, not in relief, but in grim satisfaction. "And the international alert in place. As soon as they try to access any accounts or make large transactions, it will trigger." "Thank you, Walter." "Martha." His voice softened. "Are you really going through with all of this?" I looked out my window at the night sky. The same stars shone over Miami where my son was spending my life savings. The same moon watched over both of us, mother and son, now adversaries. "He needs to learn, Walter. Some lessons can only be taught through pain." I hung up and continued writing in my red notebook, each page filled with memories, evidence, and the quiet rage of a mother betrayed. This would be my legacy, not money or property, but truth. The next step required a different kind of courage. I visited Dr. Evans again, this time with a request. "I want a copy of my medical records, everything. The diagnosis, prognosis, treatment options, all of it." He hesitated. "May I ask why?" "Because knowledge is the only weapon I have left." He printed everything, placed it in a manila envelope, and handed it to me with a solemn nod. "If you change your mind about treatment, call me immediately." "I won't," I said, knowing that time was the one resource I could no longer waste. Back at home, I opened my closet and took out the small lockbox where I kept my important documents. I added the medical records to it alongside the evidence of Michael's betrayal. Then I called Walter again. "I need one more favor," I said. "I need to go to Miami." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Martha, with your condition." "I'm not dead yet, Walter, and I need to look my son in the eyes when his world falls apart, just as he looked at me through that Instagram photo when he thought he'd won." Walter sighed. "I'll book the tickets, but you're not going alone. I'm coming with you." That night I sat on my porch watching the neighborhood children play in the fading light. I thought about all the years I'd lived here, all the changes I'd seen, the riots, the rebuilding, the gentrification slowly creeping in. Through it all, this house had been my constant, my refuge, my achievement. Now it felt like both a monument to my life's work and a testament to my son's betrayal. Angela joined me, bringing 2 glasses of sweet tea. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" "No," I said truthfully. "For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing and why." "Will you tell him about the diagnosis?" I considered this. Would knowing I was dying make Michael regret his actions? Or would it only confirm for him that he'd made the right choice, taking what he saw as his inheritance early? "No," I decided. "That's not why I'm going. This isn't about making him feel guilty. It's about justice." Angela squeezed my hand. "You're the strongest woman I know, Martha Jackson." I smiled at my friend, grateful for her presence in my life. Not strong, just tired of being taken advantage of. That night I did something I hadn't done since my diagnosis. I prayed. Not for healing or for more time, not even for forgiveness for what I was about to do. I prayed for clarity, for the strength to follow through, for the wisdom to know when justice had been served. In the morning, I packed a small bag with just the essentials. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I saved for special occasions. I put on my pearl earrings, a gift from my late husband. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized, thinner, paler, but with eyes burning with purpose. Before leaving, I stood in Michael's old room, preserved like a museum to a childhood long gone. I touched his high school diploma, his first basketball trophy, the model airplane we built together when he was 10. I wanted to remember the son I raised, not the man who betrayed me. "I loved you enough to give you everything," I whispered to the empty room. "Now I love myself enough to take it back." Walter picked me up in his old Buick. He looked distinguished in his suit, his silver hair neatly combed. He'd been handsome in his youth, and age had only added character to his features. "You look ready for battle," he said, helping me into the passenger seat. "I am," I replied, placing my red notebook carefully in my purse. It's time my son learned that even old women have teeth. As we drove to the airport, I watched my neighborhood recede in the side mirror. The streets where Michael learned to ride a bike, the corner store where we bought ice cream on hot summer days, the church where we prayed every Sunday. I didn't know if I would ever see these places again. My illness was advancing faster than expected. The fatigue grew heavier each day, the pain more persistent, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was finishing what Michael had started. He had tried to erase me while I still breathed. I would show him that I might be dying, but I wasn't dead yet. At the airport, Walter guided me through security patient with my slow pace. We sat at the gate waiting for our flight to Miami. I watched families rushing past mothers holding children's hands, adult children helping elderly parents. "Do all mothers end up disappointed?" I asked Walter quietly. He considered this, his eyes following a young man helping his frail mother onto the plane ahead of us. "No," he said finally, "but all children eventually disappoint. It's part of growing up. The question is whether they learn from it. And if they don't," Walter turned to me, his eyes somber, "then they lose something precious they may never get back." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Michael had lost me the moment he transferred that money. What remained was just the reckoning. Our flight was called. As I stood, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. Walter steadied me with a hand on my elbow. "Are you all right? We can still cancel." I straightened my back, ignoring the pain shooting through my bones. "I've worked through worse. Let's go." As the plane took off, I watched Los Angeles shrink beneath us until it was just a sprawl of lights in the gathering dusk. I thought about Michael in his Miami hotel, probably still celebrating what he thought was his victory, still spending my money, still believing he had gotten away with it. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a small smile. In just a few hours, he would learn a lesson I should have taught him long ago, that consequences always find you in the end, and that a mother's justice, when it finally comes, can be the most devastating of all. I was 14 when I first learned what it meant to be invisible. My hands already cracked from cheap soap, my hair badly braided, my uniform too big because it needed to last more than one season. I cleaned houses in the Brentwood neighborhood, memorizing the names of all the stain removers, and learning how to fold a boss's shirts without wrinkling them. When I returned home at night, my mother was already asleep. My absent father had left with a woman from a bar when I was 11. I didn't cry about it. I just swallowed the hurt and woke up before the roosters crowed to go back to work. There was no time for childhood when hunger knocked at your door every night. By 17, I carried Michael beneath my heart. His father was a boy 3 years older than me who worked at the gas station. He promised we would marry, that he would get me out of that life. We lasted 8 months. The day he found out the baby was a boy, he disappeared with a woman who sold cosmetics and never returned. I didn't cry then either. I just clenched my jaw, adjusted my headscarf, and went out looking for more houses to clean. I raised Michael alone, carrying him on my back while I washed other people's clothes. When he started walking, I taught him to play with detergent caps as if they were toy cars. We had no toys, but we had stories. No refrigerator, but we had hot soup. No television, but we had songs I sang to him until he fell asleep. He was my whole world. When Michael turned 6, one of my clients offered to pay for his elementary school tuition at a private school if I agreed to work full-time and live in. I didn't think twice. I left my apartment, lived in the patron's rooftop room, and every weekend I crossed the city to see my son. I never arrived empty-handed. Sometimes a new notebook, sometimes just a candy bar, but always with a heart ready to listen to whatever Michael wanted to tell me. Years passed and Michael grew up. I struggled to learn how to write my signature properly, my hand trembling just so I could enroll him as the responsible party on school papers. I learned to read doctor's prescriptions and then bank statements. I couldn't write well, but I understood enough not to let myself be pushed around, or so I thought. At 16, Michael told me, "Mom, when I make it big, the first thing I'll do is buy you a house where the cold doesn't seep through the walls." And I replied without hesitation, "Don't buy me anything, son, just don't forget me." Then came college. I sold the only land my father left me, a patch of earth in rural Georgia, where I had always dreamed of building a small cabin for my retirement. I sold it for less than it was worth because Michael needed to pay the enrollment fee. And as always, I didn't hesitate. "My son is going to be an accountant," I proudly told my neighbors. "He's going to get out of this life." And he did get out, but not as I imagined. It was in his third semester that he met Renee, a girl with straight hair, long nails, and a magazine smile. From the first time I saw her, I felt a pang in my stomach. Not from jealousy or envy, but because this woman had the look of someone who only knew how to take, never to give. Renee came from a family that pretended to have more than they did. Her mother, Catherine, wore knockoff designer clothes and spoke as if she had studied in Ivy League schools, though she'd never set foot in college. The first time they visited my house, they discreetly twisted their mouths in disgust. "What a lovely color," Catherine said, eyeing my pale green walls. "It's very rustic." Later, I overheard Renee in the kitchen making a comment in a low voice that I would never forget. "I don't know how Michael grew up here. This looks like a shelter, not a home." I smiled as always, but something broke inside me. Years passed and Renee gained ground in Michael's life. First, she asked that I not visit so often, then that I not voice opinions on their decisions. Then she insisted I not attend certain family events because I didn't fit in. Michael, confused and lovesick, slowly distanced himself. One night, already living with Renee, Michael visited me. It was the last time he did so without warning. I prepared him pot roast and gravy, his favorite meal since childhood. "Mom," he said, pushing food around his plate, "Renee says you're too involved in our lives, that you don't let us grow as a couple." "I just want you to be happy, son," I replied, watching my cooking grow cold on his plate. "I don't need you to take care of me anymore," he said, as if that thought would comfort me. "I'm a man now." I didn't cry. I just got up, cleared the table, and told him to take the rest of the roast with him. As I wrapped it in foil, my hands steady despite the trembling in my heart, I thought to myself, men forget who made them men. The following months were a parade of subtle dismissals. Renee began managing Michael's finances, convinced him to change bank accounts, and asked him not to tell me everything. According to her, I was a limited woman who wouldn't understand modern life. Michael, wrapped up in a mixture of ambition and emotional manipulation, agreed. I began to notice things: a bank receipt that didn't match what Michael told me, a statement that never arrived, a life insurance policy I didn't remember authorizing. That's when I decided to talk to Walter. Walter was my first love, a childhood neighbor who had been a lawyer for decades and now lived alone in an apartment full of old papers and memories. I sought him out without telling him much at first. "Walter, how can I find out if someone is using my name for strange things?" "Are you in trouble, Martha?" "No, but I feel like my son isn't my son anymore." Walter looked at me carefully, asked for the few papers I had, and for weeks reviewed movements, documents, and transfers until one night he invited me to his house. "Martha, your son put you as a guarantor on a joint account. You didn't sign anything, but the signature is there." "But I don't know how to write more than my name." "They forged your signature, and they've been taking money out little by little for 6 months." I said nothing. I took the papers, put them in my purse, and left in silence. That night, the pain didn't let me sleep. Not because of the money, but because of the truth. My son hadn't just been manipulated. He had become an active part of the betrayal. He robbed his own mother. In the following days, Renee and Catherine organized the trip to Miami. Michael, without a stable job, sold his car and then suggested using my savings. "It's family money," Renee said. "Besides, your mother isn't going to use it. Don't be silly." "I don't know, it's everything she has." "And why is she hoarding it? You're her son. You're not stealing it, you're just borrowing it early." Michael hesitated, but he did it. One night from his home computer, he transferred all the money. He did it quickly without much thought, like someone wanting to pull out a tooth without anesthesia. He finished, took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and didn't look back. I discovered the betrayal the next day. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just wrote a sentence in my notebook. My son didn't die, but the mother in me did. From then on, everything changed. My body kept aging, but my spirit hardened. I began to walk differently, my back straighter, despite the pain growing in my bones. I started making calls, checking emails, visiting offices. Something was being prepared. While in Miami, Michael walked the stone streets believing he had won something. In South Central Los Angeles, his mother was weaving the web that would return everything they had taken from her. And Renee. Renee was already planning how to disappear without a trace. What Michael didn't know was that I was no longer the woman he remembered. That woman had died. In her place remained a wounded mother, but an alert one. And when a wounded mother awakens, there is no hell she is unwilling to cross. The betrayal no longer hurt. What hurt was the certainty of having been invisible, of having been used, of having been erased, as if I had never mattered. But I was not willing to disappear in silence, because what mothers keep quiet about can also kill. I said nothing. Not that time, nor the next, nor the one after. My silence was no longer the kind that bleeds inside. It was a sharp silence, one that observes, registers, and calculates. The words dried up in my throat as if they no longer made sense. Because when a mother understands that she has been replaced by a mask, she no longer screams. She transforms. Michael didn't notice the difference, or he didn't want to notice it. He was too busy living the life he had dreamed of, a life that didn't smell like fresh laundry or coffee, a life where the voice that woke him up didn't say, "My baby boy," a clean, elegant, and empty life. Renee settled into his world, as if she had always been its owner, and he enchanted let her. He was fascinated by how she spoke with words I never used, how she walked gracefully in high heels, how she referred to things as if everything belonged to her. But behind her easy laugh and filtered photos was a subtle, cruel, and precise machine. Renee knew what she wanted, and she wanted it fast. A name, a surname, an account, and a man who could sustain her facade. Meanwhile, in Miami, night was falling. Michael was stepping out of the shower in their luxury hotel suite when he heard Renee's voice on the balcony speaking on the phone. The sliding door was cracked open just enough for her words to slip through. "Yeah, we did it. The old lady never even knew. The money's here," Renee said, her voice casual as if discussing the weather. "Tomorrow we open the account in Nevada, and we get rid of Michael. Yes, of course. He thinks we're in this together. Such a fool." Michael froze. He didn't move. He felt the water freeze on his skin. He didn't say anything. He went back to the room as if he hadn't heard a thing. He lay down next to Renee, who pretended to be asleep. He closed his eyes, but something had changed, and he didn't know yet that the worst was coming. That night, while Michael stared at the ceiling in Miami, I was in my kitchen in Los Angeles preparing a cup of chamomile tea. The night was thick. The streetlights flickered. Outside, dogs fought over a trash bag. Inside, I picked up my red notebook, the one I used to document everything now. I wrote something with my shaky handwriting. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of my silence, and my silence will hurt more than any scream." Then I closed the notebook, lay down in bed, and for the first time in a long time, I slept without tears. And while I slept in my humble home, my son in a hotel suite in Miami checked his phone. He found a bank notification, account blocked due to suspicious activity. "What?" he muttered, staring at the screen in disbelief. The first crack had just formed, and Michael didn't know that his mother in silence had already begun to move. Sometimes pain doesn't scream. Sometimes pain sits, observes, and waits for the right moment. And that moment was just beginning. The night hadn't entirely left South Central. There was still that sticky humidity between the tin roofs and the broken sidewalks. I got up at dawn, my bones creaking as they did every day. But this time I didn't feel old. Something new was beating inside me. It wasn't rage or sadness. It was a determination my soul had never known before. While heating water on the gas stove, I stared at the blue flame. The whistle of the steam took me back many years to the first day I knew what it was like to be alone. I remembered all the mornings I'd risen before the sun, all the nights I'd collapsed into bed long after Michael was asleep, all the birthdays I'd celebrated with homemade cakes because store-bought was too expensive, all the school plays I'd attended in my nurse's uniform because there was no time to change, all those years of sacrifice, and what had they earned me? A son who saw me as nothing more than an ATM, a daughter-in-law who mocked my home, a life that was slipping away faster than I had planned. Walter arrived earlier that morning, his car pulling into my driveway just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. He carried a briefcase that looked as old as our friendship. His eyes were tired but determined. "I've been making calls," he said as I poured him coffee. "We have a meeting at the prosecutor's office this afternoon. Financial elder abuse is taken seriously now." I nodded, adding sugar to my own cup. "And the international alert. Already in place. If they try to move the money again, it'll trigger flags across multiple systems." "Good." I took a sip of coffee, feeling its warmth spread through me. "How long until we know something?" Walter hesitated, adjusting his glasses. "Martha, are you sure about this? He's still your son." My son died the moment he decided I was worth more to him empty than alive. I placed my cup down firmly. I raised him better than this Walter. Whatever happens now, he brought it on himself. Walter didn't argue. He knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was made up. We spent the morning preparing documents, organizing evidence, making our case ironclad. By noon, we were sitting across from a prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases. The prosecutor, a woman not much younger than me, reviewed our evidence with growing concern. "This is textbook financial elder abuse, Mrs. Jackson, and the forged will." She shook her head. "That elevates this to attempted fraud, possibly even criminal conspiracy." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice steady. "We'll file charges. The accounts will remain frozen pending investigation. If they attempt to access or transfer funds, they'll trigger additional charges." She looked at me with compassion. "Mrs. Jackson, I have to ask, are you prepared for what this means? Your son could face serious legal consequences." "I'm dying," I said simply. The first time I'd spoken those words aloud. "Leukemia, 6 months at most. I won't live to see the end of a lengthy trial, but I will ensure that justice is served before I go." Walter reached for my hand under the table. I let him take it. The prosecutor nodded solemnly. "I understand. We'll expedite the process as much as possible." As we left the building, Walter was quiet. Finally, as we reached his car, he said, "You didn't tell me it was that bad." "What difference would it have made?" I climbed into the passenger seat, suddenly tired. 6 months, 6 years. The betrayal would hurt the same. "Martha." Walter started the car, but didn't put it in drive. "I need to tell you something. I've never stopped—" "Don't," I interrupted gently. "Not now. Not because of this." I looked out the window at the city I'd called home for decades. "If you have feelings to share, share them because it's Tuesday or because the sky is blue, not because I'm dying." He nodded, understanding. We drove back to my house in comfortable silence. That evening, Angela came over with groceries and determination. "I'm cooking tonight," she announced, barging into my kitchen like she owned it. "You need to eat something that didn't come from a can." I smiled, watching her unpack fresh vegetables and a whole chicken. "The doctor says my appetite will decrease as the disease progresses. All the more reason to enjoy food while you can." She began chopping onions with practiced efficiency. "So did you do it? Did you file the charges?" "Yes, it's done." Angela nodded approvingly. "Good. That boy needs to learn there are consequences in this world." She paused her chopping to look at me. "Have you told him about the diagnosis?" "No, and I don't plan to." I sat at the kitchen table, suddenly needing to rest. He doesn't get to use my death as an excuse for what he did. "You're the strongest woman I know, Martha Jackson." I shook my head. "Not strong, just tired of being a doormat." While Angela cooked, filling my house with the comforting smells of a home-cooked meal, I thought about Michael as a child. His first steps across this very kitchen floor, his proud smile when he brought home an A on his math test, the way he'd curl against me during thunderstorms, seeking protection from the noise. Where had that boy gone? When had he transformed into a man who could steal from his own mother without remorse? The phone rang, startling us both. I checked the caller ID and felt my heart skip. Miami area code. "Hello," I answered, my voice neutral. "Mom." Michael's voice sounded strange, panicked. "What did you do?" "The bank called. They say the accounts are frozen. They mentioned fraud and elder abuse. What's going on?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the familiar pull of maternal instinct. "I didn't take anything from you, son. I just stopped what you were taking from me." "Mom, they want to arrest me. You said you would always be there for me." His voice cracked, and I could tell he was crying. The sound nearly broke my resolve. I said quietly, "until you stopped being there for yourself." "Please help me. I don't know what to do." One simple word, a lesson long overdue. Learn. I hung up my hand, trembling slightly. Angela watched me from across the kitchen, a wooden spoon frozen in midair. Was that? Yes. I placed the phone down carefully. He's beginning to understand that actions have consequences. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room looking through old photo albums by lamplight. Michael's whole life documented in faded Polaroids and carefully preserved school pictures. His gap-toothed kindergarten smile, his awkward teenage years, his proud college graduation pose, a visual history of all I had given him, all I had sacrificed for him. And somewhere along the way, he had decided it wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough. The next morning, Walter called with news. The embassy in Miami has been notified. Michael will need to appear for questioning before he can leave the country. Will they arrest him? Not immediately. They want him to sign a statement acknowledging the financial impropriety. It's a step toward resolution that might help him avoid the worst charges. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. And Renee? Walter hesitated. There's something else. Local police conducted a background check on her. Martha, she's done this before. 3 years ago with an elderly uncle. She was never charged, but the pattern is clear. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. She chose Michael because of me, because she knew I had savings. It seems likely. The good news is, with this evidence, we can push for full restitution. You should get your money back. I won't live long enough to spend it. Martha. It's all right, Walter. This was never about the money. It was about justice. Later that day, I received another call, this time from the prosecutor. Mrs. Jackson, your son has agreed to appear at the American Embassy tomorrow to sign a statement. As his mother and the victim in this case, you have the right to be present if you wish. I thought about it for a moment. Can I speak with him? Briefly, yes, under supervision. Then I'll be there. Walter was shocked when I told him, Martha, you can't possibly fly to Miami in your condition. Watch me. I began pulling out clothes from my closet, selecting my finest dress, the navy blue one I wore to special occasions. Book the tickets, Walter. I want to look my son in the eye when he admits what he did. This is madness, Walter protested, but I could see he was already reaching for his phone. He couldn't deny me this, not when we both knew my time was growing short. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I shaved my head, not waiting for the chemotherapy to take my hair, but choosing to face what was coming on my own terms. I stood in my bathroom with sewing scissors, watching the gray strands fall into the sink. When I finished, I looked in the mirror and said, now I look like who I am. Walter arrived the next morning to drive me to the airport. He stopped short when he saw me, my bald head now covered with a simple black bandana. Martha. Don't, I held up a hand. No pity, not today. He nodded, respecting my wishes as always. You look formidable. Good. I picked up my small overnight bag. That's exactly how I want to look. The flight to Miami was uncomfortable. My bones ached from sitting so long and the pressure changes made my head throb. But I endured it silently, drawing strength from the purpose that drove me. Walter sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand when he saw me wince in pain. Upon landing, we took a taxi directly to our hotel. I needed to rest before tomorrow's confrontation. The hotel was modest but clean, nothing like the luxury resort where Michael and Renee were staying on my money. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan slowly rotating above me, I thought about what I would say to my son. What words could possibly convey the depth of my disappointment? What explanation could justify what he had done? I didn't expect remorse. I had raised him better than that, but clearly my lessons hadn't taken root. Walter knocked softly on my door around dinner time. You should eat something, he said when I let him in. Keep your strength up for tomorrow. We ate in the hotel restaurant, neither of us particularly hungry. Walter watched me with concern as I pushed food around my plate. What will you say to him? He asked finally. I don't know yet. I put down my fork. Part of me wants to scream at him. Another part wants to understand how my son became this person I don't recognize. People change, Martha. Not always for the better. I know. I looked out the window at the Miami sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I just never thought he would change this much. That night I sat at the small desk in my hotel room and wrote in my red notebook. I wrote a letter to Michael, not one of anger or recrimination, but of truth. I wrote about the day he was born, how I had counted his fingers and toes with wonder. I wrote about the nights I had worked double shifts so he could have new school shoes. I wrote about the pride I felt when he graduated college, the first in our family to do so. And then I wrote about the betrayal, the money taken, the trust broken, the dreams shattered. I wrote not to make him feel guilty, but to ensure he understood the consequences of his actions. Not just the legal ones, but the emotional toll his choices had taken. "You were my life," I wrote in conclusion, "but I was never yours. Today I understand it. You weren't born to love me, only to serve as my mirror, and now that mirror is broken, and we must both live with the shards." I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote his name on it. Then I gathered the few precious mementos I had brought with me. His first school photo, the letter he wrote to Santa Claus when he was 6, the Father's Day card he had made for me since there was no father to give it to. I placed them all in a yellow envelope. These were his history, the proof of a mother's love that he had so casually discarded. Tomorrow I would give him both envelopes, the tangible evidence of what he had been given and what he had thrown away. It would be my final gift to him, a chance for understanding even if forgiveness was not yet possible. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully in my navy dress, tied my bandana firmly over my bare scalp, and applied a touch of lipstick. My appearance might be diminished by illness, but my dignity remained intact. Walter was waiting in the lobby, dressed in his best suit. He offered me his arm, and I took it, grateful for the support. We took a taxi to the American Embassy, an imposing building flying the American flag. Inside, we were directed to a waiting room with metal chairs and stark white walls. A consular official explained the procedure. Michael would be brought in, he would sign a statement acknowledging his actions, and then we would have a brief, supervised conversation. "Are you ready for this?" Walter asked softly. Before I could answer, the door opened. My son walked in looking haggard and defeated. His normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Behind him, surprisingly, was Renee, wearing dark sunglasses and an expression of pure annoyance. Michael stopped short when he saw me. Shock registered on his face as he took in my bandana-covered head, my thinner frame. "Mom?" His voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" I stood slowly, holding Walter's arm for support. "I came to witness you sign not as a mother, but as a witness." Renee let out a harsh laugh. "How sweet! The old woman came to put on her final show." I turned my gaze to her, not with hatred, but with pity. "You took everything from him," I said quietly. "But I taught him what he'll never have again, self-respect." Renee scoffed. "Self-respect? Your son is a failure, ma'am. You raised a parasite." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I raised a good boy. You turned him into this, and he let you." Michael closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. "Mom, I don't know when I lost myself." I approached him slowly, holding out the yellow envelope. "Here are your memories, your first steps, your first words. The time you asked for a bicycle for Christmas, and I told you only if you got an A in math. You did, and I kept my promise, son." Michael took the envelope, his hands trembling. "And here," I continued, giving him the second envelope with my letter, "is something I wrote for you, not to save you, but so you can't say no one warned you." The consular official entered, then explaining the procedure. Michael sat at a table reading through the statement. It detailed the unauthorized transfers, the forged signatures, the joint accounts opened without proper authorization. With each page, Michael seemed to shrink further into himself. Finally, he picked up the pen and signed his name. In that moment, he wasn't my successful son in his expensive clothes. He was just a man facing the consequences of his poor choices. Renee had already left, storming out when it became clear that no amount of charm or intimidation would change the outcome. The official nodded to us, indicating we could speak privately for a few minutes. Michael looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Will you ever forgive me?" I studied his face, searching for the boy I had raised. "I already forgave you," I said finally. "The problem is that you haven't forgiven yourself yet. Can I do anything?" he asked, his voice small. "Yes, live with what you did and make it count for something." I turned to leave my purpose fulfilled. As I reached the door, Michael called out, "Mom, are you sick? Your hair?" I paused but didn't turn around. "I gave you everything I had, even my silence. Now I give you the only thing you refuse to accept, the truth." With that, I walked out, Walter at my side. We crossed the embassy lobby in silence. Outside, the Miami sun was blindingly bright. I took a deep breath of the salt-tinged air. "Are you all right?" Walter asked gently. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." We walked slowly down the street, two old people with nothing left to prove. At a corner, I stopped. "This is where we part ways." "What do you mean?" Walter frowned. "I'm flying home tonight. You should stay enjoy a few days in Miami. God knows you've earned it after putting up with me through all this." "Martha, I'm not leaving you to fly home alone. Not in your condition." I smiled at him, the first genuine smile in what felt like forever. My condition is terminal, Walter. A few hours on a plane won't change that. He started to protest, but I placed a finger against his lips. I need to do this alone. Please understand. Walter searched my face, then nodded reluctantly. Call me when you land. Promise me. I promise. I reached up and kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything. As I walked away, heading back to the hotel to collect my things, I felt lighter somehow. The burden of betrayal had not disappeared, but it had shifted. I had confronted my son. I had seen the truth in his eyes, and while the pain remained, so did my dignity. That night, as the plane lifted off from Miami, carrying me back to Los Angeles, I looked out the window at the city lights below. Somewhere down there, Michael was opening the envelopes I had given him. He was seeing his childhood through my eyes. He was reading my final words to him. I hoped they would help him understand what he had lost. Not just a mother's financial support, but her unconditional love. A love he had taken for granted until it was too late. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. My body ached from the day's exertions, and the knowledge of what awaited me back home, the advancing illness, the treatments I would refuse, the final arrangements I needed to make, weighed heavily. But for now, I had done what I set out to do. I had faced my son, I had reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so, I had found a peace I thought was lost forever. The plane carried me home through the darkness, back to the house that held my memories. Back to the life that, however abbreviated, was still mine to live on my own terms. Michael never saw me again. The flight home from Miami left me drained. By the time the plane touched down in Los Angeles, my body ached in ways that had nothing to do with the uncomfortable seats. The leukemia was advancing faster than I'd anticipated. Each breath felt like a victory, each step a battle won in a war I was destined to lose. Angela was waiting at my house when the taxi dropped me off, concern etched into the lines around her eyes. She had prepared the house windows open to let in fresh air, a pot of soup warming on the stove, fresh sheets on my bed. "Thank God you're back," she said, embracing me carefully. "Walter called. He's worried sick about you." "He worries too much." I sank into my armchair, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. "He cares about you, Martha. We all do." Angela studied me with the sharp eyes of someone who's known you long enough to see past your defenses. "So tell me everything. You really confronted Michael." "I did." I closed my eyes briefly, the memory of his face when he saw me in that embassy waiting room still fresh. I needed to see his eyes when he admitted what he'd done. And Renee, that snake, was there too. She was. I recalled her dismissive laugh, her designer sunglasses hiding eyes that could never look directly at the truth. She stormed out when she realized she couldn't manipulate the situation. To her, Michael was just another mark to con. "What about the money?" Angela asked, bringing me a cup of tea. "Will you get it back?" This was the question I had been pondering during the quiet hours of the flight. The prosecutor had mentioned restitution, but I harbored no illusions about the speed of justice or the likelihood of seeing those funds again in my lifetime. "The accounts are still frozen pending investigation," I explained. "The prosecutor said we have a strong case for full restitution, especially with the evidence of Renee's past similar behavior. But legal wheels turn slowly, and I don't have the luxury of time." I managed a small smile. Besides, it was never really about the money. Angela nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying, that my remaining months were too precious to waste chasing dollars I would never spend. That evening, Dr. Evans made a house call a rarity in modern medicine, but he was old school that way. The news wasn't good, but it wasn't unexpected either. The cancer was progressing steadily. Pain management would become increasingly important. We discussed hospice care, though I wasn't ready for that step yet. "It's difficult to give a precise timeline," he said gently, packing his stethoscope away. "But I would suggest putting your affairs in order sooner rather than later." After he left, I sat on my porch watching the neighborhood children play. Their shouts and laughter carried on the warm breeze, a reminder of life's endless cycle. One little girl, no more than 7, stopped at my gate and stared at my bandana-covered head with unabashed curiosity. "Why don't you have hair?" she asked, direct in the way only children can be. "I shaved it off," I answered honestly. "Sometimes we need to let go of things to move forward." She considered this with serious eyes. "Like when my mom made me give away my baby toys because I'm a big girl now." "Something like that," I smiled at her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Jasmine. I live down the street in the yellow house." "It's nice to meet you, Jasmine. I'm Mrs. Jackson." She waved goodbye and ran back to her friends. Her question answered her curiosity satisfied. I watched her go, thinking about the simplicity of children. They asked their questions directly, accepted the answers given, and moved on. Adults spent too much time avoiding the important questions, dancing around the truth until it was too late. Over the next week, Walter returned from Miami and became a constant presence in my life. He brought groceries, drove me to doctor appointments I didn't want to attend, and sat with me in comfortable silence on my porch in the evenings. The friendship between us had deepened in ways neither of us had anticipated. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with something more than concern, and I wondered what might have been if life had dealt us different cards. One evening, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, he finally spoke what was on his mind. "Martha, I need to ask you something." "All right." I turned to look at him, this man who had been part of my life for so many years, first as a love lost, and now as a friend found again. "Why didn't you tell Michael about your diagnosis? It might have changed things." I considered this question carefully. Would you respect someone who only does the right thing because they're afraid of consequences, or because they feel guilty? "No," Walter admitted, but it might have given him perspective. "It wouldn't have been real," I said firmly. He needed to face what he'd done on its own terms, not because his mother is dying. I looked out at the darkening street. Besides, I didn't want his last memory of me to be pity. Walter nodded understanding, even if he didn't fully agree. That was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. He respected my choices, even when they differed from what he would have done. The news about Michael and the frozen accounts spread through the neighborhood quickly, as such things tend to do in close-knit communities. Some neighbors avoided me, embarrassed by their knowledge of my family troubles. Others, like Angela, drew closer, offering support in practical ways. I became something of a local legend, though not all the versions of my story that circulated were accurate. The children would wave to me as they passed, fascinated by the woman who had traveled across the country to confront her thieving son. Some of them thought I had gone to punish the wicked. Others believed I was a witch with secret powers. A few who knew more of the truth said nothing, but brought me flowers picked from their mother's gardens. Meanwhile, Michael remained in Miami for 2 weeks after our confrontation, dealing with the legal aftermath. Walter kept me updated through his contacts. Michael had signed a formal agreement acknowledging the financial impropriety and agreeing to repayment terms. The authorities had dropped potential criminal charges in exchange for his cooperation and testimony against Renee, who was now being investigated for a pattern of similar schemes targeting elderly family members. Renee herself had disappeared, presumably moving on to her next target, though with the authorities now alert to her methods, she would find it harder to operate. Catherine, her mother and accomplice, had quickly distanced herself from the situation, claiming ignorance of her daughter's actions, despite evidence to the contrary. When Michael finally returned to Los Angeles, he didn't call or visit immediately. Walter told me he had rented a small apartment near downtown and found temporary work as a bookkeeper for a local business. He was by all accounts a changed man, quiet, subdued, avoiding his former social circles and the lifestyle Renee had cultivated. 3 weeks after my return from Miami, I was sitting in my rocking chair on the porch when I noticed a figure across the street. He stood in the shadow of an elm tree watching my house. Even at a distance, I recognized my son. Michael carried a small paper bag and wore simple clothes, nothing like the designer outfits Renee had insisted upon. He looked thinner, his shoulders slightly stooped, as if carrying an invisible burden. I didn't call out to him. I didn't wave or give any indication I had seen him. I simply continued rocking, watching as little Jasmine from down the street approached me with a dandelion she had picked. "It's for you, Mrs. Jackson," she said, presenting the weed with the solemnity of offering a rare orchid. I accepted it with equal seriousness. "Thank you, Jasmine. It's beautiful." I tucked the dandelion behind my ear, making the little girl giggle. When I looked back across the street, Michael was gone. But on my porch steps sat the paper bag he had been carrying. Inside were 2 glazed donuts from the bakery where I used to take him on Sunday mornings when he was a boy. He returned the next Sunday, and the one after that, always at the same time, always leaving something on my porch when I was distracted: donuts, flowers, once a book of poetry I had mentioned loving when he was in high school. He never approached me directly, never knocked on my door. He just watched from across the street, left his small offerings, and disappeared. I collected each gift, placing them on a shelf in the living room. Not because I treasured them, but because they marked his path toward understanding what he had lost. Whether it was repentance or merely guilt, I couldn't say. But it was acknowledgement, and that was something. My health continued to decline. The medications Dr. Evans prescribed helped with the pain, but left me foggy and fatigued. Simple tasks became monumental challenges. Walter and Angela insisted on bringing in a nurse to check on me daily. I resisted at first, clinging to my independence, but eventually conceded when I realized my stubbornness was causing more worry for those who cared about me. The nurse, a kind woman named Rachel, who reminded me of myself 40 years earlier, came every morning to check my vitals and help me with tasks that had become increasingly difficult. She never pushed me to accept treatments I had refused, respecting my decision to face death on my own terms. "You were a nurse, weren't you?" she asked one morning as she checked my blood pressure. "For 40 years, I confirmed. Memorial Hospital, mostly in the maternity ward, though I worked other floors as needed. Before that, I did whatever jobs I could find to keep food on the table." "I thought so. You have the eyes," she smiled. "We recognize our own. The eyes. The ones that have seen everything and still choose to be kind." I laughed softly. "I'm not sure everyone would describe me as kind these days. Kindness isn't always gentle, Mrs. Jackson. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is hold someone accountable." Her words stayed with me after she left, echoing in my mind as I sat in my living room, surrounded by the photographs and mementos of my life. Had I been kind to Michael by forcing him to face the consequences of his actions, or had I simply been unable to forgive? That night I took out my red notebook again. My hands trembled more than ever, but I was determined to write one final entry. It wasn't long, just enough, just like my remaining time. "My son, love is not demanded, it is given. And if you have learned that, then you are not lost anymore. Don't look for me when I'm gone. I will be in every mistake you choose not to repeat, in every act of kindness you do without expecting anything in return. If you want to forgive yourself, start with others. And if you ever manage to see your mother in the eyes of another woman, don't fail her. That will be my redemption." I signed with my full name, Martha Louise Jackson. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and wrote in black ink, "For Michael." Then I placed it on my bedside table next to the photograph of him as a baby, when I still believed motherhood would be my greatest adventure rather than my deepest wound. The following Sunday, Michael came again. This time he left a small pot of African violets, my favorite flowers. As always, he disappeared before I could or would acknowledge him. But that afternoon, for the first time, I found myself wondering what would happen to him after I was gone. Would he rebuild his life? Find redemption, or would he carry the weight of his betrayal forever? I called Walter that evening. "I need you to handle something for me," I said when he answered. "Of course. What do you need?" "After I'm gone, I want the house to go to Michael." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Martha, are you sure? After everything?" "He's still my son." I looked around at the walls that had sheltered us for so many years. "And everyone deserves a second chance, even if I won't be here to see him take it." "What about the money?" Walter asked carefully. "The prosecutor says they expect to recover at least half of what was taken. The rest—" He trailed off, both of us knowing Renee had likely spent it. "The money goes with the house," I decided. "He'll need it to pay off the mortgage and taxes. Whatever's left should go to a trust for neighborhood kids who want to attend nursing school. Set up something in my name." Walter agreed to make the arrangements. The next day, he brought the paperwork for me to sign a proper will this time, not the forgery Michael and Renee had attempted. I signed it with a steady hand, more certain of this decision than I had been of anything in a long time. That night, I dreamed of Michael as a child running through a field of dandelions, his laughter carried on the wind. In the dream, I watched from a distance, unable to join him but content to witness his joy. When I woke, my pillow was wet with tears. I didn't remember crying. The morning I stopped breathing dawned bright and clear. The sun streamed through the windows, casting long golden rectangles across my bedroom floor. I had known when I went to bed the previous night that I wouldn't see another sunset. There's a feeling that comes, a certainty that transcends medical prognosis. My body was finally surrendering to the disease that had been claiming it piece by piece. I sat in my rocking chair by the window, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother had made. On my lap were the red notebook, the envelope for Michael, and a blanket I had knitted with my own hands during the long nights when pain kept me awake. I looked out at my neighborhood one last time, the cracked sidewalks, the chain-link fences, the children playing in sprinklers to escape the heat. It wasn't much, but it had been home. I closed my eyes, suddenly too tired to keep them open. The sounds around me grew distant, the ticking clock, the humming refrigerator, the children's voices outside. In that space between breaths, I thought of my life not with regret, but with acceptance. I had loved fiercely. I had worked hard. I had stood my ground when it mattered most. And in the end, isn't that all any of us can hope for? My last conscious thought was not of Michael, or the betrayal, or even the justice I had sought. It was of a summer day long ago when I held my newborn son in my arms for the first time and promised him the world. In that moment, before life complicated everything, there had been only love, pure and uncomplicated. That's the memory I carried with me into the darkness. Not the pain, not the betrayal, just love as it had been in the beginning. Bong. The day of Martha Jackson's funeral was unseasonably warm for early autumn. Angela had found her friend that morning sitting peacefully in her rocking chair by the window, as if she had simply decided it was time to rest. The red notebook and envelope had been on her lap, waiting to fulfill their final purpose. Walter arrived first after receiving Angela's call. He stood before Martha's body, his composure finally breaking, as he gently closed her eyes with trembling fingers. He didn't cry loudly. Martha wouldn't have wanted that. But the tears that rolled down his weathered cheeks spoke of a love that had transcended decades, missed opportunities, and final chances. Angela prepared the wake with the help of the neighbors. It was humble, but full of love. They didn't accept elaborate wreaths, only flowers from nearby gardens, children's drawings, and the blues songs Martha had loved to listen to. People Martha had nursed decades ago came to pay their respects. Former colleagues brought stories of her kindness during their most difficult shifts. Michael wasn't notified directly, but word reached him through the neighborhood grapevine. He arrived as the small gathering was dispersing, standing uncertainly at the edge of the yard, his face pale and drawn. The neighbors regarded him with mixed emotions, some with outright hostility, others with cautious neutrality, a few with the same forgiveness Martha had shown. No one stopped him as he slowly approached the open casket where Martha lay. No one embraced him or offered condolences. He knelt beside her, finally, allowing himself to touch her hands, to confront the finality of death. Next to her, he found the envelope with his name. He opened it with trembling fingers and read every word alone in the quiet room, his voice breaking on certain phrases. He cried, but not like before. He cried in silence like his mother, the tears of someone who has finally understood the cost of their actions. In a corner of the room was the wooden box Martha had kept under her bed, now open. Inside, he found the photo of himself as a baby sleeping in her arms with a handwritten note on the back, "I still believe in you, son." Michael took the photo and pressed it against his chest. Then he went out to the yard and sat in the rocking chair where Martha had spent so many hours. He looked up at the evening sky stars just beginning to appear, and in that moment he understood that he had lost his mother forever. But perhaps if he was brave enough to face what he had done, he might still find himself. The legal battle over Martha's estate was mercifully brief. Walter had ensured the will was ironclad, and with the financial fraud investigation ongoing, no one challenged Michael's inheritance. The house passed to him, along with the settlement money from the restitution order, approximately $90,000 of the original $180,000. As Martha had instructed, half went into a trust for neighborhood students pursuing nursing careers. For weeks after the funeral, Michael didn't move into the house. He continued to live in his small apartment downtown, coming to the property only to maintain it, mowing the lawn, fixing the loose boards on the porch, repainting the peeling shutters. Small acts of restoration, as if by repairing the house, he might repair something in himself as well. The neighbors watched with varying degrees of skepticism. Some muttered about the prodigal son returning too late. Others suggested that redemption could begin at any moment if one was brave enough to take the first step. Most simply observed, withholding judgment, as Michael slowly earned his place in the community his mother had loved. 3 months after Martha's passing, Michael finally moved into the house. He brought little with him, some clothes books, and the photograph of himself as a baby in his mother's arms. No fancy furniture, no expensive electronics, none of the trappings of the lifestyle he had once coveted. He slept on the sofa for a week before finally moving into his childhood bedroom, unable to bring himself to disturb Martha's room. One morning, little Jasmine stopped at the gate, watching him work in the front garden with the same unabashed curiosity she had once directed at his mother. "Are you Mrs. Jackson's son?" she asked. Michael paused, trowel in hand. "Yes," he said after a moment. "Yes, I am." She told me sometimes we need to let go of things to move forward. Jasmine twisted the hem of her shirt. Is that why you're fixing her house, because you're moving forward? Something like that. Michael smiled, faintly reminded of another child who had once asked simple questions that required complex answers. Would you like to help? I'm planting some flowers, African violets. They were her favorite. Jasmine nodded eagerly, and together they knelt in the soft earth, creating something new where there had once been only loss. Gradually, Michael built a new life for himself. He found work as a bookkeeper for several small businesses in the neighborhood, earning enough to support himself modestly. He volunteered at the community center, teaching financial literacy classes to teens and young adults. He attended church on Sundays, sitting in the back pew where Martha used to sit, though he wasn't religious in the traditional sense. The ghost of what he had done would always haunt him, but he learned to live with it, to use it as a compass pointing toward better choices. He developed a reputation for honesty almost to a fault, refusing even small shortcuts or compromises in his financial dealings. 1 year after Martha's passing, something unexpected happened. A video appeared, online footage taken by an American tourist at the Miami embassy, capturing the moment Martha had confronted Michael and Renee. The tourist had been waiting for a passport when their camera recorded the exchange. The video went viral, spreading across social media platforms, accumulating millions of views. People commented from around the world that Mother is a queen. That's how you teach a lesson without violence. Dignity doesn't age. Michael discovered the video when a neighbor mentioned it. He watched it alone in the living room, reliving the moment of his greatest shame from a new perspective. In the video, he saw not just his own defeat, but his mother's strength, the quiet power of a woman who refused to be erased. He didn't try to have the video removed or explain away his actions. When reporters sought him out for interviews or talk show appearances, he declined politely but firmly. This wasn't a story for public consumption or viral fame. It was his life, his mistake, his redemption to earn. Instead, he channeled the attention towards something constructive. Working with Walter and several former colleagues of Martha's, he helped establish a small foundation in her name dedicated to preventing elder financial abuse. The foundation provided education for seniors about protecting their assets and training for medical professionals to recognize signs of financial exploitation. 18 months after Martha's death, Michael received a letter. It was from Renee, postmarked from Nevada, where she was serving a 3-year sentence for financial fraud. She wrote that she was sorry for what had happened, that she had been in therapy, that she wanted to make amends. She asked if they could meet, talk things through, perhaps even try again once she was released. Michael read the letter carefully, noting the familiar manipulative phrases, the subtle way she shifted blame to circumstances rather than her own choices. He recognized the patterns, now saw them clearly, without the veil of infatuation. He wrote a single line in response, "I learned from my mother that love is given, not demanded." He never heard from Renee again. Life in the neighborhood continued. Children grew up. Old neighbors passed away. New families moved in. Through it all, Michael remained tending to the house with careful hands, planting African violets each spring, sitting in the rocking chair to watch the evenings settle around him. He didn't remarry, though. There were relationships over the years, honest ones built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. He never had children of his own, but he became something of an adopted uncle to the neighborhood children, helping with homework, attending school plays, offering guidance when asked. On the anniversary of Martha's death each year, the neighbors would place flowers on her grave. Not store-bought arrangements, but wildflowers picked from gardens, dandelions chosen by children, simple blooms that spoke of genuine remembrance. Michael would stand slightly apart, watching this ritual with quiet gratitude for a community that had found it in their hearts to accept him despite knowing his greatest failing. In time, the story of Martha Jackson and her son became neighborhood lore, told and retold, sometimes embellished, but always preserving the central truth that accountability can be an act of love, and that redemption begins with accepting responsibility for one's actions. Michael was not a perfect man. He had moments of backsliding, of self-pity, of wondering if it might have been easier to simply run away and start fresh somewhere else. But each time those thoughts surfaced, he would look at the photograph of himself in his mother's arms, at the words written in her steady hand, "I still believe in you, son," and he would choose again to stay, to face what he had done, to honor her memory not with grand gestures, but with the daily work of becoming someone worthy of her belief in him. Those who leave make space. Those who stay sometimes fill it with memory and sometimes with redemption. In Michael's case, it was both. He lived in the house where he had grown up, surrounded by echoes of his mother's presence, but also creating something new, a life built on the lessons she had tried so hard to teach him, lessons he had only fully understood after she was gone. Was it enough? No one could say for certain. Redemption is not a destination, but a journey taken one step at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. But in the quiet moments when the house settled around him, when the neighborhood children laughed outside his window, when he sat in his mother's rocking chair watching the stars emerge, Michael felt a peace he had never known in his days of chasing wealth and status. And sometimes in the space between heartbeats, he could almost hear his mother's voice, not in anger or disappointment, but as it had been when he was small and the world was simple. "I still believe in you, son." Not because he had become perfect, but because he had become honest. Not because he had erased his mistakes, but because he had learned from them. Not because he had become who she had wanted him to be, but because he had finally become himself, a self capable of recognizing the value of what she had given him all along. Love, not demanded but given, not earned but freely offered, not perfect but enduring.